Hello and welcome to the Black Entrepreneur Blueprint Show. I am your host, Jay Jones. Black Entrepreneur Blueprint was created specifically to educate and inspire Black entrepreneurs to launch, build, and grow successful businesses. Join us as we help build an economic power base in the Black community by promoting business ownership. If you are currently an entrepreneur or want to be an entrepreneur, we invite you to join us every week here at Black Entrepreneur Blueprint.
Welcome to the Black Entrepreneur Blueprint, episode number 191. I'm your host, Jay Jones, and today we have another exciting and informative show in store for you. Today we're going to be interviewing Mr. Mike Dorsey. He is the founder of the podcast Black Fathers Now, and he also owns an apparel company, blackfamilyapparel.com. Mike has a very interesting and inspiring story about how he got laid off from his successful sales job to create a business that gives him life. Stay tuned for Mr. Mike Dorsey. Before we start today's show, I just want to give you a few updates about what's coming up in the next few weeks. First and foremost, we are still going to be doing the live call-in show with my CPA, Mr. Thane Martin, where you'll be able to call in, talk to Thane and myself, and he's going to discuss the new tax law changes and how they affect entrepreneurs. So we'll keep you posted via social media as soon as that gets scheduled. And finally, I just want to remind you guys, my new book, A New Black Wall Street, is coming out within the next 2 weeks. And I will also alert you guys via social media. And we're going to be talking about in that book how to create wealth through e-commerce and 12 steps to build a six-figure income within 12 months. So I will keep you guys posted and hold tight. And here's Mr. Mike Dorsey. We are on the line with brother Mike Dorsey from blackfathersnow.com, the podcast and the website. Brother Mike, how are you today?
I am wonderful, my brother. Thank you for allowing me to come in and be a part of the Black Entrepreneur Blueprint family, my man.
I appreciate that, man. Thank you so much for spending your time. I know you're a busy man. You got a lot going on. And for my listeners that are not too familiar about you, Mike, just give me a little bit of your background, and then we're going to jump into your entrepreneurial journey, like where you're from, what you did, and what you're doing right now. And then we're going to get into your journey.
That's what's up, my man. Well, thank you again. My name is Mike Dorsey, and I am a husband to my beautiful wife, Maisha, and I am father to our two little munchkins that are the love of our life, Morgan and Maxwell. And I'm originally from Augusta, Georgia, born and raised, and went to college at Georgia Tech. It's not Georgia Tech University, it's Georgia Institute of Technology. And I finished Georgia Tech, and then from there, I just jumped into the whole workforce. I did outside sales in a lot of different industries. The most time I spent in outside sales was in the pharmaceutical industry, but I did pharmaceutical sales, home health care, physician recruiting, consumer goods, a little bit of IT sales, pretty much, a lot of different genres within the industry of sales. And one of the things that I learned along the way, that when you're in an outside sales capacity, especially like in the medical industry, layoffs are something that are going to be experienced pretty much. If you haven't had one, you're probably going to have one at some point soon. And that's just part of the industry. It just comes with the territory. And so in February of 2017, I experienced the last layoff from my most recent sales opportunity. And then from that point forward, I just felt like it was time to go and try to create, some type of opportunity in which I can utilize the gifts, the skills, the talents that I've been blessed with and that I've acquired along the way to kind of create my family's own financial destiny, so to speak. And I'm currently in the midst of creating that right now. I'm not at the end point by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm definitely in the process of building and developing something special.
Cool. All right. That's a great background. Now, you had mentioned, Mike, that you got caught in a layoff. So Now, were you going to start your business, and we'll get into your businesses in a minute, but were you going to
Okay.
start your business prior to that, or was that the impetus and that was like, hey, now I got to do something, or were you
Mhm.
planning on doing it prior to?
Man, I'll tell you, man. Entrepreneurship is something that's hot right now. It's like everybody in their dad or everybody in their mom wants to create a business or monetize something or create something because the internet provides this medium for us to have access to do just about anything that we can think of, right? But truthfully, I grew up in a very traditional sense, right? I grew up seeing, folks go to college, you get your job, you work for that company for so many years, you save your money, you put it in retirement, and then you retire and ride off into the sunset and enjoy your golden years. So that was kind of the model from an immediate family perspective that I saw most readily around me. And so for me, the whole concept of entrepreneurship or testing ideas or thinking about things or something that kind of spawned later on from being exposed to different people to, listening to things like the Black Entrepreneur Blueprint and, just kind of seeing other people utilize their gifts and talents to take control of their life. Because when you're in a corporate entity, even if you are making really good money and, great positions and all this kind of stuff, you're still at the behest of somebody else, right?
Right.
Somebody else still controls your time. Somebody else still controls the amount of money that you can make. And really, they kind of put governors on what it is you can do because your role is to help that company make money. And so for me, I've always been a guy that's, had ideas, right? But
Mm-hmm.
in reality, everybody has ideas. Like everybody that you talk to that has more than one brain cell has an idea. But we both know that when it comes to business, it's all about execution and distribution. And so for me, the ideas were always there. And especially those days where I didn't really enjoy what I was doing day in and day out, the ideas started to kind of bubble up more and more. But I really never had the cojones, so to speak, to just step out and just say, you know what, I'm going to try something and see what happens. Because historically speaking, my life, it was kind of revolving around just a traditional work environment, so to speak. And so I really didn't have that motivation to do so. So when the layoff happened, it was one of those scenarios where I wasn't necessarily making the decision on my own. The decision was made for me and to go and, at this point, try it. And the blessing of all of that, kind of a backstory, is that, over the years, my wife and I paid off our student loans. We saved up a little bit of money and, basically got our situation down to the point where the only debt that we have is our house, paid cash for cars, all of that. So in essence, when this thing happened, when the layoff happened, we were afforded a runway to go and try some different things and see how they work out. So to your point, I had the ideas there, but I really never had the gumption or the courage to just say, you know what, I'm done with this. I'm going to go try something. But now kind of being forced out of the door, with a layoff, it was like, you know what, why not? If you're not going to do it now, when are you going to do it?
Right. Well, I'm going to talk to you about that transition in a minute, but
Okay.
so my listeners will know, tell them exactly what you're doing right now in terms of your entrepreneurial journey. I know you started out with an initial podcast, which
Mm-hmm.
you actually shut that down. Now you started out with this other one, Black Fathers Now, which is a
Mm-hmm.
great concept and a great platform. So just tell us what made you start the first podcast, what was that about, and then what made you transition into Black Fathers Now.
Okay. Well, what's interesting is when you really do a personal inventory and you step back and think about your life and all the experiences that you have, everybody has a story to tell, right? Everything in your life happens for a reason. And a lot of times the things that happen in your life are not necessarily for you, but for people that you are going to encounter. So my story or my journey is not necessarily just for me. It's for those that I encounter because it helps them to bridge the gap for things that they may encounter going forward. So back in 2015, I just had all this inspiration, like, being in outside sales, I would be in the car listening to podcasts, listening to, books on tape and audio books and everything, just getting inspiration from a lot of different places. And then I came to realize that, I had a story. And so I actually wrote a book back in 2015 called Abe, Always Be Engaged, The 7 Keys to Living a Fit Urban Life. And the book in itself were 7 keys that I found were extremely important for me that deserve my full engagement. That's why the title is Always Be Engaged, or the acronym ABE, because these 7 things were, I found to be fully integral into the success of my life. And they're not to tell other people that they need to be focused on those 7 things, but it's something from a personal evaluation perspective I came to realize that I needed to do to have a fully engaged life. And so after the book was written, I started to really understand or think about different ways in which I can get my story or get some of my thoughts or the connections that I've made along the years or whatnot, get those things out to the public. And the best medium for that was podcasting, in my opinion.
Okay.
I've spent the last decade and a half talking, so why not figure out a way to use that to impact the lives of others? And so with that, I initially launched a podcast called The Fit Urban Life Show. Okay. And The Fit Urban Life Show ran up until May of 2017, but it went from the fall of 2015 to May of 2017. I did 122 episodes of that. And the Fit Urban Life Show was really all about just helping people optimize their quality of life across the board. And so I brought in various guests who had various experiences, and it was really all about helping people optimize their quality of life. And but the thing about the Fit Urban Life Show that I came to realize was it was all over the place. Like, It was not a targeted focus. I was not speaking to one particular demographic. I didn't have like an avatar, so to speak. I wasn't speaking to one particular person. And so somebody might tune in one week and listen to something on travel, and somebody might hear something about nutrition and whatever, all these different things that are important to me, but they were all over the place and it wasn't targeted. And the thing is, when I sat down and really got some consultation from a brother who has really done well in the podcast space, he was just like, by being all over the place and trying to serve everybody, you really serve nobody. Right. So that really caused me to step back and really reevaluate my thought process. And when I was talking to this brother, I was just kind of laying out my story with, fatherhood and all these different things and my history. One of the things that he mentioned was, everything that you talk about revolves around fatherhood. And I was just like, it's interesting. And then he was also like, don't be scared to talk specifically to one type of father or one specific demographic. And so to that point, that is where the whole thought process of Black Fathers Now really came about. And so I shut the Fit Urban Life Show down and kind of revamped my thought process and said, you know what? I'm going to specifically talk to Black fathers because the information, the resources, the wisdom that I've acquired over the years, the connections that I've made, brothers need to hear this, and they need another voice that's going to speak specifically to them and to the issues that we face so that we can ultimately be the best that we can be, which, allows us to be the best versions of ourselves. And then the default to that is we become the best fathers that we can be. So I'm a talker. I hope I didn't overtalk the question.
That's cool, brother.
The question there, brother. Okay.
Yeah, I know you have a tagline, and what is that?
Okay, the tagline is bringing the village to the brothers.
There you go.
And yeah, man, and because, you think about the African proverb, it takes a village to raise a child, right? Mm-hmm. And the unique thing that we experience here is the fact that most of us don't live in villages. And a lot of us don't even necessarily live in communities in which we have a whole lot of physical support around us. We move around the country for jobs or for school or for whatever. And so you, in essence, have to form your own de facto village or community around you to inspire you and to give wisdom and insight, to check you when you need to be checked, to show you when you need to do things in a different way. And so the medium of podcasting or the technology allows us to bring that village to the brothers no matter where they are. And that village comes in the form of insight, inspiration, and wisdom from various guests like yourself. You're going to be on an upcoming episode of Black Fathers Now.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, no doubt. But brothers who have unique experiences and lots of wisdom to impart into the brothers for them to kind of listen, to learn, to garner from, to then apply to their life, because it's all about application. So you learn something, now what are you going to do with it, right? And so that in essence is it, bringing the village to the brothers, man. And that's what we're using the podcast to do.
As a father, Black father, obviously, and I talk about my daughters a lot on the show, mm-hmm. I just want to give you kudos for that platform and what you're doing, because we have a lot of stress on us as brothers, man. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we need to get together just amongst ourselves, talk things out. It's almost like going to the barbershop, man. And,
That's right. I had been to the barbershop
yeah,
for years, brother.
yeah,
I'm follically chapping.
me and you both.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, and it's definitely needed. And the positiveness that you bring and the guests that you bring on the podcast, man, I give you nothing but props on that, brother. Let me ask you this. In terms of the actual podcast, because people always ask me this, what is your monetization strategy? Since we are on the Black Entrepreneur Blueprint.
Black Entrepreneur Blueprint.
Right.
Man. Honestly, man, it's interesting because for a lot of folks that don't know anything about the podcast game, most folks think that it's like a radio show that everybody's just getting paid a lot of money to get on and talk or whatever. That's really not what happens, right? But you do have to have some type of a game or some type of a strategy when it comes to your podcast. And so when I think about my podcast, I never initially started the podcast to turn this podcast itself into like some type of monetization stream, right? Mm-hmm. But I do look at the podcast as a platform to build an audience. It's a way to connect to people on a lot of different levels. And so it's kind of like you have different phases to the game, meaning, you have the podcast, which opens up this reach to everybody. Any and everybody can download and listen to it. But if somebody wants more, they can then connect with me via social media. If they want me to come and speak somewhere, if they want me to come run a seminar or host something, that's an opportunity there to monetize on the back end. But for me personally, I'm not going to say that I am not going to have sponsorship from outside entities, but at this current moment, the only sponsor of the podcast is actually my apparel company called Black Family Apparel. But the thing is, I am utilizing the podcast to basically build an audience, to, create a movement, to create a family atmosphere. And then on the back end of that, from a monetization perspective, the opportunity to speak, the opportunity to sell books, the opportunity to, learn from you about developing e-courses and learning and all of that type of stuff. Those are opportunities on the back end that I'm looking to, from a monetization strategy perspective, to utilize my podcast for, not necessarily as the primary revenue generator itself. I probably, I guess, from a business perspective, would look at the podcast as kind of like the free information that I'm putting out there as like a lead generator, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And then from there, you can build, better connectivity to potential folks that would want you to come in. And then, you can talk about, monetizing, an opportunity at that point.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because when I started Black Entrepreneur Blueprint over 3 years ago, my mentor asked me, he said, well, same question I just asked you, how are you going to monetize the podcast? Mm-hmm. And at that point, I said, I'm really not doing it for the monetization purpose. I'm doing it to get the information out there. And I said, it'll turn into something eventually. But what I had to explain to him is I don't make my money from a podcast. I have e-commerce businesses and things of that nature. So my whole intent was to just spread the information and see what happens. And so it's continued to grow and grow and grow. And like you said, so if people want more, there's avenues for them to get more with Black Entrepreneur Blueprint. My book is coming out, and a couple online courses, a new one is about to drop, things of that nature. So it's not where, and I get what you're saying, that, we're force feeding anybody, but if you want more, I got it.
That's right. That's right. That's right. You mentioned something there it's a little different. Like, with content creation businesses, a lot of times it's about building an audience and then figuring out your monetization strategy on the back end versus creating a widget or a product or a service that you're looking to sell. So it's kind of you think about something like Facebook, where they got to the point where they were, multi-billion users in before they actually started making money,
right?
Because they were building the audience base, and then they figured out ways to monetize it on the back end.
It is a great book out there by Michael Hyatt called Platform. I don't know if you ever read it, but it's definitely a great book. Just to build your platform, whatever that is. And so, I started building my platform, and I didn't even think about monetizing it because it wasn't the purpose to build Black Entrepreneur Blueprint for that. So now, Mike, I wanted to ask you, since you were kind of not forced into stepping out on your own, but you said you probably may not have done it at that point in time. So what would you tell somebody that's on the edge, that they're working in corporate America, and they're on that precipice, they're thinking about going out on their own, And what would you tell them if one of your friends came to you and said, "Hey, man, I'm about to go out on my own. What do you think about it?" Because you have a different perspective because
Hmm.
you almost had to do it right away.
That's right. That's
So
right.
what would you tell people?
Man, the first thing I would tell people is to really do a personal inventory of yourself. Really step back and really think about who it is you really are, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
right now the time period that we're living in is pretty interesting because you see a lot of people who are really not entrepreneurs, who are really not folks who are creatives and all that kind of stuff having some level of success doing it because the getting is good right now. You know
Right.
what I'm saying? And so I would tell people to take a personal inventory and really figure out exactly, what it is you're wanting to do, why you're wanting to do it. But then the other part of it is really look around yourself in the sense of, do you have a wife? Do you have children? You have to make sure that everybody's kind of on board and supportive because at the end of the day, if your internal family is not supportive of what's going to happen, it ain't going to work. You know what I'm saying?
I
Because you're
know
going to be
that's right.
fighting. Yeah, that's right. You got to have support. And it's one of those things where regardless of whether you're making the right or the wrong decision, as long as y'all are making that decision together, cool, keep it rolling. So I would say do the personal inventory. The next thing would be, even if you have any inkling, and you should probably do this regardless of whether you want to be an entrepreneur or not, but get yourself in a financial place where you have options, right? So, stop buying excess stuff, get yourself out of debt, double down and pay off your student loans. Don't get yourself to the point where you are so leveraged up to your eyeballs that you can't make that move should something happen. Or like for me, I was in the pharmaceutical industry at a time and layoffs happen all the time. So I knew that at any given moment, somebody could be acquired or something could go generic or something could happen and it could hit the fan and we could be getting a conference call on Friday saying, all right, we're cutting your whole division. I knew that was always a potential. So therefore, we lived below our means. We saved our money. We had an emergency fund so that should anything happen, we were basically good for a little bit. We had some runway. So first, do a personal inventory. Second, get your financial situation cleaned up so that you have options. And then third, honestly, and you talk about this a lot, man, knowledge and know-how, right? Know-how comes from doing. Sometimes you can't do anything, any more research, like that whole analysis by, paralysis by analysis or whatever,
Yep.
where we just read, I got to read 12 more books. Like I run into so many brothers, man, even like with the whole notion of starting a podcast, they're like, man, well, I got to read 3 more books about it. And, I got to, try this. I'm like, dude, just do it. Just try it.
That's it.
Sometimes, because I read something not long ago and it was talking about how after the basic amount of information needed to start, any more information, all it does is just add to your confirmation bias. So all it's doing is just adding to whether or not you should or you shouldn't. You're not really getting any more information that's going to help you in whatever you're going to try. So third is you just got to do it. You know what I'm saying? So you got to do a personal inventory. You got to believe in yourself. You have to make sure that your family is bought into it. Get your financial self in order. And then after that, man, just try it, man. Don't be scared. The only constant in life is change. So don't be scared to change. Don't be scared to try. Don't be scared to fail. I mean, another thing that I always ask folks in any type of situation is to really step back and ask, what's the worst that can happen? You know what I'm saying? And if you really step back and really pull all the layers back to what you're talking about and really think about the worst thing that can happen, and you really break that down and look at it, you stare that in the face, and then you ask yourself, could I handle it? And if the answer is yes, then what you got to lose?
That's great. That's great practical information. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that I want the Black Entrepreneur Blueprint family to really take note of, Mike did this unconsciously but consciously in terms of his finances. And I like what you said. You paid off all your debts except your home, and you're
Mm-hmm.
buying cars with cash and things of that
Mm-hmm.
nature because you are absolutely right about being hamstrung and being leveraged up to the hilt, and that actually will stop you from doing a whole lot of things. Now, I had this conversation with my oldest daughter that's about to get out of college, and I was telling her, I said, you're going to get out of college, you're not going to have much debt at all. I said, so she's a creative. So I said, if you want to actually go into and be able to be a writer or whatever you want to do in Hollywood or in New York or whatever, I said, you need to make sure that you're not leveraged because you don't want your nut to be so high each month that you can't do what you really know you need to be doing or want to do. So
Mm-hmm.
that's very important. So I think a lot of times I always talk about a transition. If you're working
Mm-hmm.
in corporate America, getting the tools you need for your business, be it physical tools or whatever, stacking up money, trying to pay down your debt. So when you do make that transition, it's not something where you have to make money right out the box.
That's right.
And it's funny because when I started the podcast, one of my best friends, who's a former business partner of mine, he kept asking me, "How you going to make money in the podcast? How you going to monetize?" I'm like, "Dude, what you don't understand is that's not how I make money. I don't have to monetize the podcast because I have
Mm-hmm.
other things going that were already set up and I was doing prior to the podcast." So I just want the BEB family to understand that it'll make it a lot easier on yourself and your family if you take the steps to get yourself in, fiscally straight before you
Mm-hmm.
go into entrepreneurship. Because I've talked about it on the show before. If your wife isn't happy and you coming home,
Mm-hmm.
you're busting your hump, doing
Mm-hmm.
everything you can, and then you got to come home and your wife or your spouse, your husband, whoever isn't happy, that's not conducive for
That's
for
not. That's not.
successful entrepreneurship. So,
That's the key word,
yeah.
successful.
so so you have to make sure that you guys are on the same page, and that is a very important factor, and I'm glad that you brought that up. Mike, I wanted to switch over real quick in terms of your podcast and just marketing in general. Now, you've been in sales, outside sales, and you got the gift of gab. I can tell that. So,
A
so
brother like to talk.
that's it. No, hey, that's good. That's good.
Uh,
So, what are some of the crucial steps that you've taken to grow your business?
as far as the podcast itself, man, honestly, you have to get it out there. I mean, you legitimately have to connect with, various groups of like-minded individuals and, jump into conversations. One of the things, and this is where, from a podcast perspective specifically, one of the opportunities to really grow your podcast is really to try to get guests on your podcast that have an audience themselves, right? Because then you too get the opportunity to leverage each other's audience to both grow your podcast. So therefore, by me coming on your show, then hopefully some of your audience gets exposed to me, and vice versa. You coming on my show, some of my audience gets exposed to you, and then we all allow ourselves to then connect with different audiences. You also have to understand the whole digital marketing space, which is a beast. Like I'm glad you have me on here. I'm not a brother who's at the end game. Like, I'm coming back as the guru telling everybody how to do it. I'm in the midst of it right now, right? And so understanding the whole digital marketing and funnels and all this kind of stuff and driving traffic here, and that's another beast all in itself. Understanding Facebook ads and Instagram ads and figuring out how to test this one to see if it works and your responses. I mean, you have to do all of those things in this day and age that we're living, because if you have a brick and mortar, you might operate differently. But if you're doing something digitally, you have to figure out a way to drive your audience to your product or service or to your podcast or to your platform digitally. And there are so many things on the back end that need to take place to do that. So for me, it's a lot of trial and error, right? It's a lot of trial and error. It's a lot of connecting with people who are currently doing well and trying to pick their brain or trying to leverage relationships there to help grow. And, I'm in the process of learning. So, I don't have it all figured out. It's a slow grow here. And one of the things also that I want to do is I really want to grow organically as well. So the thing about growing organically is the fact that you then build an authentic audience. See, some of the things that people don't realize, like when you go to Instagram or whatever, and you see someone's profile and they have 50,000 followers or 20,000 followers, there are so many services out there that will help you get to that number of followers, but that does not always translate into revenue, or that does not always translate into an engaged audience base, right? And so for me, it's important to grow organically and grow with folks who are actually potential customers or people who would want me to come and speak, or folks who are interested in Black Fathers Now, the podcast, or, doing some of my performance coaching, so to speak, on the back end. Those are people that I'm very much engaged or interested in growing with. And so whether that looks like I have 100,000 followers or 1,000,000 followers on the back end or 1,000, I would rather have that 1,000 organic folks who are 100% in line with who I'm speaking to versus just the numbers who have the facade of looking good. So for me, it's a multi-pronged approach. I mean, it's connecting with people and leveraging each other's audience base. It's learning how to properly use like the social media marketing with Facebook, Instagram ads, and all of that. Connecting with folks and understanding all the click funnels and redirecting traffic and SEO and all of that stuff. I mean, that's not necessarily my world. I went to Georgia Tech, but my degree is in economics, so I have to find people who can who can do all the tech stuff. But in essence, right now, that's it. And then just getting out there and speaking. I mean, there is no shortcut for getting out in front of people. I mean, yes, it's a digital marketing thing or doing things digitally, but you still gain so much momentum by going to events and speaking to people and connecting with people, shaking hands and kissing babies, because that allows you to grow as well, because those people then go home or then pull their phone out and start looking at what you have going on. That's how people verify nowadays.
That's right.
So, yeah, so that's pretty much my, my way of doing things right now.
Cool. Now that was a great answer. You touched on a whole lot of different things, and you're right. I would rather have an organic audience of 1,000 people as opposed to 10,000 people following me that barely know who I am or what I stand for. So that makes that makes a whole lot of difference. Also, it's funny that you mentioned too the grassroots approach, because that's what I'm about to embark on with my book tour, and like you say, shaking hands and kissing babies, because I think from our conversations off the air, we talked about the energy that you get when you're standing up in front of the room, when you're connecting with your people. And that's dynamic and very important. So now, Mike, I wanted to talk to you about how are you monetizing right now for yourself? I know you have the clothing line, blackfamilyapparel.com. I know you do speaking. Is there anything else that you do?
Yeah, so pretty much right now it's the clothing line, speaking, but then also my book, Abe, Always Be Engaged, The 7 Keys to Living a Fit Urban Life. Those are the three things right now. But I definitely, and it's awesome to connect with you, because ultimately I want to dive more into the whole realm of e-commerce and creating courses, and basically at the end of the day, figuring out ways to utilize my gifts, talents, and skills to benefit the world, but then also to take care of my family very well, right? And then serving as an example to them to be able to do different things on the back end and not necessarily be limited to just getting a job. Now, getting a job is what you're called to do. Go for it. You need people in all places. You need to have doors open on multiple fronts, because that gives options and that gives people the ability to choose and fluctuate into what they're called to do in life. So for me personally right now, the apparel line, like you mentioned, blackfamilyapparel.com, the book, and building the speaking resume and hosting and running seminars. But ultimately, I would really love to kind of transition as well into doing a lot more of e-commerce, creating courses and things of that sort as well.
And I want the BEB family to take note, because Mike talked about using your talents and gifts. And really, that's what it's about, maximizing and focusing on those God-given talents and gifts and sharing that as a service. We talk about this all the time. Our job is to serve. So in serving, then you can also receive by developing your talents and skills and helping other people. So, I mean, the concept is pretty simple, and we need to start doing that. And I feel that there's so much talent out there in our community that's being bound because we're working for somebody else. I mean, and we can't really do what we've been put here to do. So that's why I'm so big about trying to help people make that transition, because when you can live the life that you're supposed to live, and I'm not talking about money wise, I'm just talking about what you're put here to do. I mean, your whole outlook changes. I've worked at jobs where I couldn't stand going to work every day. And the difference between that and then doing what I'm doing now is night and day. And as I say that, Mike, because you're in a certain stage in your business, I want to ask you, what was it like for you? And I want you to take me inside the Dorsey household. What was it like for you when you started your business after you got, laid off that first day? Were you over there scratching your head saying, oh man, what am I going to do? Or what was your mindset like at that time? Because I want people to kind of understand what it is, because I know for me, it was a pretty easy transition because I had been used to it. But I know for some people it's very hard. So what was that day like when you didn't have to get up and go to work for somebody else for the first time?
Well, I mean, now that part of it is awesome, right? But I will tell you, man, there are a lot of emotions that go through this particular process, and especially when you're in a place in which you have not, quote unquote, made it yet. You know what I'm saying? Like when, it's easy to say like, oh, I can give you the whole journey or whatever once I've made it. But when you're actually in the trenches, you're actually in the process of developing and becoming ultimately, who you will ultimately be going forward, it's different. And when that thing first happened, man, I'll tell you from an emotional perspective, it's different because what's interesting about working for somebody is that when you're working for somebody or working for an organization, there's always an answer, right? There's always somebody you can go to for an answer. There's always a resource. It's like if somebody asks a question, if I don't know it, I can find somebody who can answer it for me. It's like always the resource is always there. The moment that you are facing that headwind and you have that position of I have to make the decisions, there's a point in which sometimes questions are asked and you really don't know. It's like, Mike, how are you going to make money now? I don't know. And the thing is, I don't know was so hard coming from corporate America because I don't know was a sign of weakness when you're working for somebody else. Whereas here, you not knowing is actually a good thing because then you can ultimately get to the point of finding the root cause of what's going on and find solutions because you can openly admit that I don't know. But for me, being somebody that's kind of, I'm not like a super smart dude, I guess, but I'm been relatively smart guy and done okay academically and all of that stuff. I've always been used to having an answer, right? Mm-hmm. So for me, one of the biggest transitions was mentally getting to the place of being comfortable with not knowing. I know that sounds simple, but until you jump there, until you get to that point where I really don't know, and being comfortable saying that and not feeling lesser than by saying you don't know, that to me from a mental perspective was something that it took me a while to get over. But once I got comfortable with not knowing, I'll step straight up like, man, I don't know. We got to figure this thing out. I'm cool with it. I'm cool saying that now. But for me, that was one of the hardest transitions of kind of the uncertainty and, the lack of quote unquote security. But then when you stop and you think back, you're like, okay, I was laid off or I lost other jobs or whatever. What kind of security was that? You know what I'm saying? It's like this perceived security you have when somebody else signs your checks versus the lack of perceived security when it's on you. But then it comes back to the concept of, once I'm comfortable not, saying I don't know, do I now have the confidence that I can do it? Right. Do I believe in myself enough? Do I believe in the skills, gifts, talents, and interests and things that he's placed inside of me, all these experiences that he's placed inside of me? Do I believe in myself enough to have the confidence to step out and do what I'm called to do in life? So that whole I don't know thing was really hard for me. I don't know if some of the listeners can really groove with that or not, but for me, that was being comfortable not knowing was probably the hardest of it all.
On a show I did a couple episodes ago, probably about 4 or 5 episodes ago, I talked about being comfortable being uncomfortable. So same
I remember
concept.
That.
Yeah,
I remember
comfortable
that
being uncomfortable. And sometimes you have to understand that's the situation you're going to be in and don't let it freeze you up. You still continue to work through as you're doing right now and move forward. And speaking of moving forward, Mike, where do you see yourself and your business in 5 years? I know you got a lot of plans. We've talked about it off the air, but where do you see yourself and your business in 5 years? What do you want to be doing and tell us what that looks like?
Man, ultimately, when I think back to the things that truly drive me, outside of, my relationship with God, my relationship with my wife and my kids and, my family and everything, I think about things that truly give me life. And what gives me life on a daily basis are speaking, teaching, and connecting. And when I say connecting, I mean connecting people to people, connecting people to ideas, connecting people to experiences, whatever, but just connecting, being that tube and not a vessel, right? Allowing things to flow through me. So speaking, teaching, connecting, but then also cooking, traveling, and consuming thought-provoking content. Like those are 6 things that truly give me life. And so for me, I've come to realize that those are things that I need to figure out a way to do on a regular basis. So 5 years from now, 20 years from now, 100 years from now, depending on how long I'm blessed to live going forward, when I think about myself, I expect to be doing those in some type of capacity on a very regular basis, but then allowing those things to really take care of my family very well, but then to impact the world to leave a legacy going forward, right? And so when it comes to Black Fathers Now, I see Black Fathers Now being the #1 podcast in the fatherhood space, right? Because I'm speaking directly to us, directly to Black fathers, because it's all about helping brothers become excellent in fatherhood. Because if we get excellence and allow excellence to become the new average, then where will we go? Because we are the heads of our household. We are the leaders, in our own community, and our communities start with our household. And so right. I see that being the case. 5 years from now, I see the opportunity to speak on major stages and, connect people to ideas like I mentioned before. And just to help folks and to also open the door for others to come behind me and do the same thing. Because, I don't approach life as a zero-sum game, right? I don't feel like someone has to lose for me to win. Like I'm not trying to chop somebody else's house down or whatever to build a bigger house. I'm like, we can all build. Right. There's 7.7 billion people in the world, and there's a lot of land out here. There's a lot of opportunity. And there's enough for all of us to grow. So how do we not build together? So one of the things that I would like to do going forward is to be that connector to, create these kind of ecosystems of us just growing and building and developing and, creating crazy revenue. Because if we create crazy revenue, then we have crazy opportunities that we can pour into other folks. And then you're not limited to having to ask other people for resources. So you can then, if you have an idea, you just fund it. You can make it happen. You and I think about something, we hear something from a young guy, we can like, yo, Mike, let's go in on this. Come on, Jay, let's go. Mm-hmm. We can go in and make it happen. We can be the rainmakers in that type of situation. And I want us to start thinking in that regard, because it's not about me having a big house on a hill by myself. It's about us building this mountain, this Wakanda, so to speak, right? But we want Wakanda to be everywhere, you dig?
That's right.
And, But ultimately 5 years from now, man, just really impacting the lives of people on a very deep level, on a very meaningful level, but then taking care of my family very, very well and having an experience-based life. Like I could care less about stuff. It's all about experiences. I can't tell you the first pair of shoes that I got or the first pair of Jordans that I got when I was 12, but I can tell you about the first time I took an international flight. Mm-hmm. Or I can tell you about the first time my kids experienced the beach. Or I can tell you about the first time my wife and I, took a trip somewhere. I mean, it's all about experiences, and those things allow you to grow individually and become the best versions of yourself. So in my over talkative manner, I hope that answered your question.
Nah, that was right on point. Because what you did is you took everything that mattered to you. You're speaking, you're teaching, you're connecting, you're cooking, you're traveling, and then you're reading thought-provoking content, and you're going to shape your business around that, or businesses around that, as opposed to creating a business. And some people do this all the time. They create a business that they hate. I've done that before. So, I mean, that makes a whole lot of sense, man. It was a great answer. You had mentioned also about experiences. What is the best experience that you've had so far being out on your own?
The best experience. I could say multiple experiences. And one of them is basically being able to having the freedom to connect with people on my own time. Beforehand, when I was doing the first podcast, I was still doing sales. And so that was something that I had to schedule interviews after the babies went to sleep. So in the middle of the night and, shooting emails when I had time to do this and do that. But now being free to take the things that I'm passionate about, the things that I'm really good at doing, and put those on the front burner instead of keeping those on the back burner and focus my attention on the things that matter is extremely important. And that's been one of the most awesome experiences ever, because a lot of times, what's interesting, I like to read bios of people. And when I look at somebody's bio, it's interesting, they'll say, oh, so-and-so is the CEO of this Fortune 500 company. They went to this school and that school, and they worked here, worked there, and all their accomplishments. And that's like a big, 20-sentence paragraph. And then one line at the very bottom, they'll say, well, in their free time, they enjoy spending time with their wife, their children, and traveling the world. And I'm just like, wow. So this big old paragraph talks about your professional career, and you get one sentence to describe the things that matter.
Right.
Like that speaks to me when I see that. So for me personally, it's like I want to flip that around. Like I want the full paragraph to be the stuff that matters. And then, oh, by the way, yeah, he creates this, he creates that, he does that, he did that, and he, made so many millions doing whatever. That's the one sentence. But the stuff that matters is what I really want to focus on. So being able to kind of reverse that. I heard Will Smith on one of his I think it's either YouTube or on Instagram or something. I think he was in Australia, and he was going around and he was just showing the beautiful landscape. And he said, he made the statement. He said, you have to figure out a way to do the minimal amount of work that allows you to have the most fulfilled life, to live the maximum amount of life. And that spoke to me. It's not about working a little bit, because we got to grind. We got to do our thing. Right. But the flip side of that is, how are we grinding so that we can have the best quality of life? Are we doing that so that we can have the most fulfilled life? And if that's the case, then we're winning.
Right. Right. That makes a whole lot of sense, man. That was an excellent answer, brother. Mike, we're going to close out. Got a couple quick more questions for you. We had talked off the air, and this is one of the biggest things that I think that helps make a successful entrepreneur, or even a transition into entrepreneurship, is buying in by your other half, by your spouse, be it a husband, yes, be your wife, whatever. So what was that conversation like when you told your wife that, guess what, hon, I got laid off and I'm not going back to corporate? So was she with you on it? Tell us about that, because that's important.
That is very important. And what's interesting is this, I don't know if you're familiar with like the 5 love languages. Yeah. Okay. And so, we've skimmed through. We haven't done the full in-depth study and all of that, but you kind of skim through it and you start to understand that we all speak different languages, right? And when I say speak different languages, meaning we communicate in different ways. And so certain things hit me, whereas other things might hit or might not hit her. Like, I'm a words of affirmation person, right? So if you want me to go swim through shark infested waters, you talk me up and I'm ready to go. You know what I'm saying? You tell me the good stuff, and like I'm that. Like, you just make me feel good and I'm ready to just go fight the wolves off, right? Right. But with my wife, she is not necessarily about that. Like, I can give her all the compliments in the world. She's like, yeah, that's cool. I mean, I agree with you. I love you. I support you, but show me. Like, that's like, she's the show me person. And so for her, she's extremely supportive. She's extremely, she's in the midst of it all. She gives me feedback, honest feedback too. Your wife can give you feedback. Can't nobody else give you. Oh, Lord have mercy. Yeah, boy, I love that woman though. And so she gives me feedback, but she's also one that I need to show her the stuff. I have to show her the results. So when I show her, this episode, or when I let her listen to this, or when I show her sales from the apparel, or when I show her, someone wants me to come speak here or do this seminar there, then she starts to say like, all right, I got it. Right. It's like she knew it all along, but she needs that confirmation on the back end. So for me, the conversations with her are just obviously on the front end, assuring that, look, okay, yes, they're not going to be, major cuts in the household and all of that. We've done a good job saving. We've prepared, to do something like this. But then the flip side of that is it's incumbent upon me to start showing some results so that she can continue to have that buy-in going forward. And she's 100% supportive. But we have to refine and understand the proper communication channels that best impact or, that best speak to our spouses. And I think a lot of singular, not spouses. Right. Don't get me caught up. Spouse, singular.
You might be hearing about that.
I know, right? Look, I didn't mean it. But we have to really understand how to properly communicate, because a lot of times, a lot of our issues are not because, it's bad intention. It's just a mess up in our form of communication. Like misunderstandings a lot of times stem from, improper communication. So I think, for anybody that's looking to do anything, whether it be entrepreneurial or, go on a trip or whatever, make sure you understand how to properly communicate that to your spouse in a way that they understand, not the way that you want to say it, but in the way that they understand it best so that you can minimize, miscommunications or misinterpretations. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. And Mike, before we close out, man, I just want you to tell listeners how they can contact you. We definitely want to support Black Fathers Now on the podcast, but tell listeners how they can contact you and tell them all about everything that you got going on.
Okay, appreciate it, man.
Yes,
well,
sir.
most definitely. I first and foremost want to say thank you for letting me come on to the Black Entrepreneur Blueprint, man. I've been a member of the family for a long time, brother. I'm glad that we're able to definitely connect. But definitely you all can check out the podcast Black Fathers Now. A new episode drops every Monday. Blackfathersnow.com. You can listen on all the various mediums: Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play. Pretty much anywhere you listen to podcasts, you can catch Black Fathers Now. Subscribe, leave some comments, leave some ratings. That would be awesome. I also have an apparel company. My wife and I, it's called blackfamilyapparel.com. So you can visit blackfamilyapparel.com. And the whole concept behind Black Family Apparel is helping to reshape the narrative. Like, we have to really do a better job telling our own stories and balancing the narrative that's out there about Black people, about Black families, about marriage, about kids. We have to start telling our own stories to balance the narrative. It would not be so bad if we had a balance out there. If you had bad stuff, but if you had some good stuff to balance, things would be okay, right? But we need to do a better job of that. And so with Black Family Apparel, there are images, there are slogans, there are T-shirts, hats, sweatshirts, things that are all about helping to kind of tell the story of the nuances of the Black family. And so you can visit blackfamilyapparel.com. And, you can grab something. And actually, I'm going to add a little benefit to the Black Entrepreneur Blueprint family. At checkout, if you use the code BEB for Black Entrepreneur Blueprint, if you use the code BEB at checkout on blackfamilyapparel.com, you'll get 15% off your total order. Okay?
Appreciate
15% off your total order by using BEB at checkout. So that's just a little something for the Black Entrepreneur Blueprint family. So definitely I appreciate y'all's support. Also, I have a book, Abe, Always Be Engaged, The 7 Keys to Living a Fit Urban Life, currently available on Amazon. And once again, these are just 7 key areas that I found deserve my full engagement in life. And the whole concept is to really inspire you to identify those core areas of your life that deserve your full engagement. And definitely working on some things on the back end to do some performance coaching under the brand Reflect My Truth. The whole concept there is to really help people understand and identify their truth so that they can ultimately reflect their truth out and live an authentic life and impact the world in the way that they are meant to do. So definitely check me out. And social media, Black Fathers Now, Instagram, Facebook, Black Family Apparel, Instagram, Facebook. Or you can also check me on Instagram. I am Mike Dorsey. And if you find me at I am Mike Dorsey, let me know you heard about me on Black Entrepreneur Blueprint, and we can connect.
My man, I appreciate it. And this last question, I can't let you get away without this one.
All right.
And I ask all my guests this. Mike,
Okay.
if you had the chance to have a conversation with one person, living or dead, who would it be and why?
One person. Man, I should have had this already prepared. One person, living or dead. This is when you say one, see, I'm this is it's hard. One person, living or dead. If I could talk to one person, I probably would want to talk to Jesus. And I would just ask why. Just give me why, and just leave it open, because if I had to pick one, that's gonna be that one.
That's it. That's a great answer. That would be mine too. Why? I got a couple questions for you.
Yeah.
But
I got a whole book if you really want to go at it. But I would just start with why, and you know the condition of my heart, so you can answer what I'm asking. So
Oh man. Well, Mike, I first and foremost want to thank you for taking your time to share your journey to the BEB family. It's a great journey, and one of the things I want to point out to all the BEB family members, we're in different stages of our transition from employee to entrepreneurship, and so I think this was a great interview for someone who's kind of relatively new to make that transition because you're still 3, 5, 10 steps ahead of others. So as long as somebody's ahead of you, you can learn from that. So I really appreciate you coming on, man. And is there anything else that you wanted to get out before we closed out today?
man, I mean, like I mentioned before, man, thank y'all so very much for the opportunity to come on your podcast. And Jay, I just want to salute you for what you do, man. I mean, you bringing your story and allowing us to kind of peek behind the curtain of what you have going on, because your story and your successes and your challenges and the things with your family and just all this stuff that you bring to the table, man, is such an inspiration to brothers like myself. So, I don't have anything else to say, but thank you for what you do, and you please continue doing what you're doing because you're making waves in the world, brother. Keep it up.
I appreciate that so much, man. I'm just doing what God put me here to do, bro. And that's
All
what I'm
day.
trying to transition and let everybody else do the same thing. Do what you're supposed to be doing. And it's actually an honor and a privilege to be able to talk to brothers and sisters like yourself and just being able to just have this great dialogue, man. Once again, I want to thank you so much. And as you BEB family members know, we always support anybody that comes on the show. So please definitely support Mike in his endeavors. Brother, I appreciate you, and we will talk soon, man.
I appreciate you, brother.
That was Mike Dorsey laying it down for us, family. Boy, there was so many great takeaways to this interview. One of the biggest things that stood out to me was when I asked him where does he see his business and himself in 5 years, he didn't really focus on the business per se. He focused on continuing to do the things that give him life. And he spoke about speaking, teaching, connecting, cooking, traveling, and consuming thought-provoking content. So what Mike is actually doing is creating a business around the things that he loves. And sometimes we create a business and it becomes a monster and we're at the mercy of the business. But I really like this thoughtful, in-depth answer to that question. So Mike really knows what he's up to and what he's doing. This interview I thought was also very important because Mike is a reluctant entrepreneur. He got laid off from his sales job, and now he has to make that transition from former employee to entrepreneur, and he had to figure out how to monetize his businesses and also what businesses to start. So I thought that was very insightful and things that he talked about in terms of doing that. And another thing that I really thought was good, he said, I asked him, what would you tell somebody that's about to jump into entrepreneurship? And he talked about doing a personal inventory. Number 2, he talked about getting in financial shape before you go into your business. And third, just do it. And the financial issue is big, guys. So if you have the opportunity to plan to transition, make sure that you have your finances in order. Now, it's never going to be a perfect time. I don't even believe there's such thing as perfect. So you may have to do it when you're a little uncomfortable, but try to have your finances in order. When you have a huge nut that you have to crack every month, it makes it that much harder to be successful because you have all of that pressure on you. So if you knock down your bills and you live below your means, then it's a little easier to make that transition. You'll have a runway where it's going to give you time for you to become profitable. So I think Mike hit on a lot of good points, and it was really a good look, actually, to listen to somebody that was a reluctant entrepreneur, but always knew that there was more inside of him, that he wanted more. He wanted more for himself, for his family, and he wanted more experiences. And he talked about that. He wanted to life of experiences, not necessarily things. An experience-based life is the way that he worded it. And that's very important because, once again, money is great. We need it to survive and live. But your experiences with your family, helping other people, serving, that's what it's all about. And so we want to definitely support Mike, go check out his podcast, Black Fathers Now, and also the website, blackfamilyapparel.com. You know how we do it here. Everybody that comes on the BEB podcast, please support them. Check out his website. Check out the podcast. I'll see you guys next week. And before I forget, thank you once again for supporting the Black Entrepreneur Blueprint podcast. I mean, I couldn't do this without you guys. I love you guys, and it's an honor for me to be able to do this and to be able to share my experiences and other entrepreneurs' experiences with you guys. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the show, and I'll see you same time next week. Peace.